Sequitur, which is Mike's next venture. Actually, only his second venture after starting Bo Frere in Newburgh, actually in the Ribbon Ridge area of, I guess, when did Ribbon Ridge break away from Chehalem Mountains?
Was when we started subdividing the Willamette Valley into AVAs, 2005.
Okay, so prior to that, and you were one of the, I guess I'd call it, I mean, the first wave of Oregon producers would be obviously people like David Lett, I mean, I guess Papa Pino and all that. With Irie, you had the Knudsens, you had Dick Erath, you obviously had Richard Corey, who brought that crazy clone back, apparently from Alsace. Second wave would have hit kind of in the early 80s, let's say. And then you started up when?
86. But I kind of have been referring myself and Ken Wright and John Thomas as second wave. When we came, Ken Wright came up from California and started Panther Creek. His first vintage was 1986. I started planting our vineyard, the Bo Frere vineyard, in 1987. It wasn't until 1990 is when I had a harvestable crop.
Okay, good. So you would have been obviously after, say, Harry Peterson.
Harry Peterson planted the Ribbon Ridge vineyard sometime in that time, 86, 87. But he started Chehalem, I'm not sure, 90, 91, somewhere in there.
And what do you think separates today, if you were talking to somebody and they said, well, why should Ribbon Ridge be separate from the rest of the Chehalem Mountains? Is there something distinctive that you think is there?
Yes, distinctive in that a couple things. The soil is extremely consistent, marine sediment. And with the Chehalem Mountain, there's many different soil profiles. And Mikey, you probably have a little better, in-depth knowledge of all of that. So soil, in my opinion, the elevations are relatively within a certain parameter, not too high, not too low. And I think one of the most important things is the people. They're all quality driven, small producers. You've got Patty Green, you've got Brick House, you've got Trisatum, you've got who else? You got Eminent Domain, you've got a handful of producers that are all very like-minded, which I think has a strong influence on the outcome.
Yeah, and I know a number of producers, like for example, do you buy any fruit anymore for your Willamette Valley bottling?
Yes.
You do, okay. A
35,
little bit.
Production. Sorry, Josh, to interrupt you.
No, about how much?
Yeah, about 35-40% of our 10,000 case production, give or take, given the vintage. But yeah, we're still finding terrible that excite us outside of the vintage.
And I know you sell some fruit from Sequitur. Do you sell any fruit from Bo Frere?
No.
No. So everything that's grown at Bo Frere goes into the bottles.
So Bo Frere has 2 vineyards. The Upper Terrace, which is a newer vineyard planted in 2000, and the Bo Frere vineyard, which was planted in 1987, and a number of years thereafter. You recall in those days we were planning on, we planted grapevines with no rootstock. They were all native, just natural. And because phylloxera had not been an issue, and it was in sometime shortly after we planted, 1989, 1990, phylloxera was discovered.
And so backing up a little bit, how did you wind up there?
Well, it was a spur of the moment decision, summer vacation. My wife and I were living in Colorado Springs and decided to take a vacation out to Oregon. There was a really delightful wine I was exposed to, the Elk Cove 1983 Wynn Hill. And it was so compelling that it was a driving force to vacation out in that area of the world. I was in the wine business selling wine for a distributor. In any case, in pursuing that wine to buy a case, stumbled onto this farm that was a foreclosure, convinced my sister and my brother-in-law that we must buy this. Just under 90 acres for a mere $129,000. It had a house, barns, beautiful
I think we have a
field.
photo, Joe, I think we have a photo of the original pig barn.
You
It
do?
will pop up here. Yeah, that Christopher sent to us.
Ah, yes. That's a good picture. And it translates good. That is the Bo Frere winery, and before that, it had 60 head of pig in there. You can see a little wiener pig right in the center of the screen,
Okay, yep, right, yep.
and you can see the cow to the right.
Looks like he's
But-
sleeping.
Yes, so that barn was built in 1932, and we renovated it into a winery in 1991.
And you're still in there.
Still in there. Now, if you had a new picture, it doesn't look anything like that. There's a multiple of additions.
And also a different color.
Yes.
And so you kind of jumped on that. It wasn't, you didn't do any soil tests, or did you bring anybody out to?
So it was so enticing. Both my wife and I said, this is where we could raise our children. We could live a lifestyle that I used to work on a dairy farm as a child, and it was always
Maryland, did you live in Parkton or Moncton?
Parkton, same place where my brother-in-law lives, same house that my brother-in-law lives in. Anyway, I was exposed to farming as a young lad, and it was in my blood, and it still is in my blood. And when we saw this farm, it just was too good to pass. So when I asked my sister and brother-in-law, Robert Parker, for some of you who don't know, we did ask David Alsheim to come by and look at it, the field, the vacant field, and give his opinion on the potential value, if it was worth it. And he said it was a good site. He didn't say it was a great site. He just said it was a good site to protect.
And he wound up bottling later in his career. He wound up bottling a Ribbon Ridge, the Ribbon Springs Vineyard. So he actually, I was mentioning earlier, different people buying fruit from different vineyards, and you do see Ribbon Ridge showing up in a number of producers under their different bottlings and vineyard bottlings. But yeah, I think he actually made the plunge himself. Did he buy that vineyard?
I
Ribbon
think they're
Springs?
partners with the Lowacres.
Yeah, because I think they get all the fruit. Pretty sure.
I believe so, but I'm not sure. David's still active in different capacities in the industry. He is definitely an ambassador, very active in the industry, promoting not only the winery, but the industry.
Well, David was responsible, wasn't he, for bringing the Dijon clones in?
Possibly, or the Castiles, I'm not sure.
I think the two, and as a matter of fact, it's another interesting story. The first time I visited you, which was in July of 1995, I was working for a wine importer, and we had Hubert Lignier, Régis Fauré, Pierre Cornu, and Jean-Michel Jacob over at the IPNC. And I talked to your brother-in-law, Bob, and said, listen, these guys would really like to visit a winery. Could we go to see Mike? And he said, absolutely, set it up. So that was actually my first visit to a winery in Oregon. And what I didn't realize was that Jean-Michel Jacob, his father, they have a Pepiniste nursery in the Haute-Côte de Beaune. And he insisted that he meet David Adelsheim because his father worked with the University of Dijon on the clone isolation. So all these clones that you have, the original cuttings and whatnot, came out of University of Dijon, but came out of the Jacob's nursery.
Really?
In the Haute de Beaune, you said.
Pardon?
In the Haute de Beaune.
Oh, in the Haute de Beaune. I mean, that's where his actual nursery is and their winery. But his main job was at the University of Dijon. And so there's a kind of an interesting connection there. And I remember that the Castiles were really insistent about meeting Jean-Michel because they wanted to thank him for all the work that his father had done.
You mentioned these pioneers, and I have to give them such great credit for what our industry, Oregon, is experiencing. We have cutting edge viticulture. We have cutting edge marketing from the Castiles, from Adelsheim, from very creative individuals with the International Pinot Noir celebration and the Steamboat, which is a collaboration of winemakers from all over the world come to one little area and bring wines of problems. And that was orchestrated here in Oregon, and has really educated and brought the bar for not only Burgundy, but California, New Zealand, and Oregon.
Well, and you're definitely seeing it, well, increasingly with the presence of especially the French coming in and setting up. I mean, obviously, you go back to Robert Drouin with the DDO, I guess was the first. But now you're not quite crawling with frogs, but you have, there are a lot of French people, including your partners now at Bo Frere, correct?
Yes, my new partners, because my two older partners retired and sold their shares to a French company, Henriot, which they own Bouchard and William Favre and Henriot Champagne. And it's a great partnership. Mikey and I are as well doing a French wine over there, soon to be announced from Volnay. And
you can switch it. You can switch it up and call it brothers-in-law.
yeah, okay.
Why not? And I also just noticed that the folks from Hamilton Russell from South Africa have come in.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I think they made their first wine in 2018. Right. So it's not just the French. Anyway, it's just it's interesting to me how Oregon has become, in a lot of ways, a crossroads for particularly Pinot producers from all over the world, the New World as well as France. It's a real common ground, I've found. And
real estate prices are still, I mean, they're not like Burgundy and certainly not like Napa. So it's still relatively affordable.
And probably not even like, say, the Santa Rita Hills, I would suspect.
Yeah, I don't know.
Sonoma, because Mikey, you probably are up to speed on that. I think Oregon is still a good value. So still a really exciting place for somebody to set up. It's not so formidable. And
it's so uncharted still. You know, there's a lot of undiscovered terroir. It's a, you know, the Willamette Valley is a 65-mile stretch on the east side of the coastal range. There's a vast amount of hillside terrain that is just waiting to be discovered. I think that can open up new avenues for the changing climate, and we feel like we're pretty special here in the Ribbon Ridge with, I think, a more powerful soil that adapts better in a warmer vintage. I think that's a pretty good note to think about when you first brought up the Ribbon Ridge.
I never thought of it in that vein, but
Well, I mean, I'm saying there's a lot more. I mean, obviously there's a lot of playing, but there's some interesting stuff going on kind of, west of Salem, that area around Dallas.
Absolutely.
I mean, you could talk about the folks at Emily Robert, who've been doing really, really nice work for a while. And there's some really nice vineyards out there. But it's still, for now, it's isolated, right? I mean,
Very much.
I mean, everything as far as tasting rooms and whatnot kind of if you're heading west, everything kind of stops at Van Duzer Winery. And next thing you know, you don't really see a lot except for land almost until you hit the ocean. So yeah, there's obviously a lot to explore.
Yep.
And how many acres did you originally plant, Mike, at Beau Frere?
well, the total acreage is just at 26 acres, but not planted all at once. I planted 5 acres here, 9 acres there, and then started replanting because of early root stock, no root stock, and getting phylloxera. So we had to then continue. We've been planting almost every year since then.
I think there's a picture here, an early picture of you. You're probably going to laugh at some of these. I think Christopher dug these up. Actually, maybe there's a picture of Mikey and is it Jared? There you go.
Oh, wow. Where'd you get that?
His pistachio teeth are in prime view.
Well, that was that is my first forklift. And that was in 1991 or 2. 20 some years ago. How many years ago? That 30?
Almost 30.
30 years ago.
And then there's a picture, I believe, of Mikey and Jared on, there you go.
Oh, yes. Yep. So that's Jared, the one driving the tractor. He's born in 1983. Is that you or Mike Nathan?
I don't remember that picture. They both all look kind of the same, so it could be me. I'd say it could be me.
Mikey then, and born in 1986. So Jared is the winemaker now at Domaine Roy, a project in Dundee.
And he consults with some other and he consults with some other people as well.
Yes. I remember that old tractor.
And the barn still looks the same. You haven't done a whole lot of renovation.
Well, there was, but yes,
It was
that.
You guys there? I think I just lost you. Julie, I'm frozen. Hello?
You're still on, Josh. They're just frozen.
They're frozen. That's new on me. Has that happened?
Yeah, I would just keep talking.
Okay. Anyway, just going to try. Well, now they're off. Have to listen to me. So Mikey, I believe he'll be able to vouch for this when he comes on. Being a second generation winemaker in Oregon is not a real common thing. It's becoming more common. There they are.
We're back. Sorry.
Okay, there you go. I was just saying that this makes Mikey a second generation grower, vigneron in Oregon, which is not a real common thing even now, even though the industry is going into its 40 years. You have people like Wynn, Harry's daughter.
Castiles,
Obviously, so with Ben Castile and Mimi.
Bethel Heights.
And I guess you have with Ken Wright, obviously.
Ken Wright, though, is still running Ken Wright, but is one of his sons working with him?
Cody's got
Cody's got his own label.
right.
Yeah, Cody's got a company, one called Purple Hands, and I'm not sure if he's involved with Ken Wright. I'm just thinking my way kind of up and down the valley. It's still not real common, right, to have a second generation?
Well, you got David Lett, you got Jason.
Of course, you got Jason, right. And of course, now you have now you might have a third generation. And I think there's a photo, Julie, of
Well, that's in the works.
well, let's see what he wants to do.
Don't forget the Ponzis.
Oh, Louisa, of course. Yeah. But still, I mean, as far as an industry goes, it's there you go.
He looks a lot bigger now.
So that's Jack, right?
Jack. Yep. He loves being out here. We're in the home that we grew up in, right above the winery. So he's kind of experiencing what I grew up experiencing already. It's pretty exciting.
Looks like you got convinced, so that's good. Did you study agriculture, that sort of stuff in college?
Yeah, I took just a half of a year really in the undecided category at Oregon State University until I did a vintage experience in Spain. I had worked in the vineyards really since the Nintendo NES came out. I wanted to buy it, so he made me pull suckers in the vineyard. But I did an internship in Spain, came back and enrolled in the fairly new enology viticulture program at Oregon State University right after. And it was a pretty good idea. My dad came from the school of hard knocks. He didn't come from any science background, just making decisions based on intuition and feeling, which is still a huge part of what makes, I think, the greatness of artisan wine. But getting a little lens.
Plus experience, which grows every year.
Right. The hard knocks is crucial. But with a little lens of science and a foundation of chemistry to be thinking about, I think it adds a good amount of arguments between the two of us, for sure. Educated idiot over here. But yeah, I worked around the valley for a little at several other wineries. I stuck around, came back in 2015 to work with my dad professionally.
So I want to talk a little bit about the style of the wines at Bo Frere and how they've evolved, because it's been really interesting for me. I mean, I guess I go back to the 91 of the 92 vintage, which I tasted with Bob. I used to come down from New York and show him our French portfolio once or twice a year, and he'd always serve me a blind wine or two or five. And one time he poured me Bo Frere. This is before I knew about the whole project, which I thought was fascinating. But the wines, I believe, are quite a bit different now.
They are. In those early years, most high-end, quality-driven wine producers had a few parameters that they thought necessary. Super low yields, super ripe fruit, and a lot of new wood.
And you're referring to Burgundy as well.
Burgundy, Well, certainly, yes. But
Yeah,
Bo
here, no,
Frere,
there's no question that Burgundy post 88, like I'd say maybe 85, from that era up until until the late 90s. Yeah, Burgundy, there was a lot of new oak and a lot of low yields and a lot of hot years as well.
so those were the parameters. And so the Beaux Frères, what we routinely would pick brick wise, BRIX, a British measure. What does it mean? Anyway, sugar. We would pick it 24, 25, 26 bricks of natural sugar in the grapes. And we thought, wow, this is going to make great wine. And then ferment it out to 14 and a half, 15 plus degree alcohol, and then put it in a heavy toast French barrel, namely from one cooper, Francois Frère. And it got attention. Beaux Frère certainly got a lot of attention, both good and bad. I remember people criticizing me for making wines that were more like Syrah than Pinot Noir. They aged quite well, but every year as I became more mature and experienced, I slowly tweaked it around until Mikey comes, and then he really tweaked it around.
I don't know if that's true.
Well, what is your parameters of?
So 2000 or 2002, maybe you started turning the brakes on extraction a little, but you use certainly much less, to half the amount of new oak.
Yeah.
And also converted the vineyard to biodynamic farming.
Well, yeah, there are tweaks.
In the 2000s. Those are fairly substantial tweaks.
Was it 2000, you say, where you switched to, where you went to biodynamic?
No, 2003. 03.
Okay.
Started the experimentation
But
with Philippe Arminier in
03.
Oh, I thought it was earlier than that. Okay.
No. Yeah, so every time in the early years, experimenting with different fermentation temperatures, different fermenter vats, capacity wise, slow evolution. But then Mikey comes in, and what are your major differences?
I think one of the big ones that I learned from my past kind of non-Beaux Frere work experience was in the first 20 days of the wine's upbringing, fermentation. About 3 to 4 days less time on skins, going from 21, 22 days inside the fermentation vessel to 18. I saw that it retained freshness. It didn't over extract. I think a lot of the features post fermentation ethanol extraction was less, and therefore I think a slightly more. I wanted to bring in a little more vibrancy and electricity and freshness, whereas longer tank time tended to, I think, it added more opulence, but I think with it took a seat a little bit less freshness and age worthiness.
Also, those sugars, you pick it.
Finishing the alcoholic fermentation quickly, and then pressing was the point. I think my dad, for the majority of his tutelage, it was all about the texture of when he was out in the field of the tannin profile, not really about sugar or acid. When the texture was the maximum quality without compromised fruit, he pulled the trigger. That's quite a bit later than how we make the decisions now. It's based on very much based on a threshold of acidity that we need to retain, that we do not want to just dump loads of acid in the fermenters. And with that comes lower alcohol. We use.
Have you changed, I remember a number of years ago visiting, and you were there as well. You were around, and you were working with the Dominique Laurent barrels,
Oh, yes.
and you were using those for, I want to say, for the upper terrace.
Yes, 04. That was 2004. I used 100% Dominique Laurent
Magic casks.
magic cast. Correct.
Have you switched up? I mean, obviously you started with Francois, and I believe almost everybody of your generation, Mike, was using Francois. I mean, that was definitely David Adelsheim's way.
Well, they still are large for Domaine Romani Conti, the barrel for that estate. I don't know if they're still 100%, but certainly many barrels.
Sure. But today, Mikey, are you working with a number of different Coopers these days, or do you lean heavily one way or the other?
I don't lean. I lean on 3, 4 cooperages. I don't. It's hard because there's so many up and comers coming through. But for me, I'm learning, and I like keeping one thing constant. If it's high quality, 2 or 3 coopers, it allows me to learn the terroir much more easily than this year we get 5 barrels from a new Cooper, New Forest, or the forest sourcing is difficult at times, but Francois Frère is still with us. Taranceau and Atelier Center of France is a good one that we've kind of been supporting more of, and keeping the toasts and the forest types on all 3 Coopers the same. We don't deviate. We kind of stick one variable that doesn't change. I think it's important.
Okay. And I know I don't know if every year you make a Zena Crown, but are there any other vineyards that you source from that you also bottle by themselves?
Yes, our direct-to-consumer program exclusive has access to now about 6 single vineyard wines that are not from our estate. And it's a very exciting program for me to track the terroirs. My father thinks that it complicates our brand a little and makes it too much.
I like simplicity, and the lower the number of cuvées, the better. But
so it's a fun topic of conversation, but I think I think our customers appreciate it a lot, and I do too.
So Mike asked me yesterday if we were going to taste some wine while we were doing this. I'm getting thirsty. So I pulled I pulled something interesting. I told Bo Frere, did you pull an 07?
I pulled a 2007 Upper Terrace, Bo Frere Upper Terrace. And
Yes.
you? Patty Green. Oh, the
07.
Etzel block.
Cool.
07.
I think that was maybe, when did she come out with the Etzel block?
That was the first vintage, I think.
Yep, I think so.
So
I was actually able to put my hands on that in my horrific cellar.
So the story behind that is Patty asked me if I would be offended if she named a wine in honor of me, and the back label kind of talks about that. And I just thought it was one vintage, just 2007, and nice cork.
No, it's a little seepage, but anyways.
Well, it's how many years old? 13 years old. Anyway,
It's fine.
That's a better cork.
no, it isn't.
Yes, it is.
I got a little bit here.
Anyway, so Patty Green Cellars, as some of you know, Patty has gone on to greener pastures, but
Yeah, that was
she has come out with an Etzel cuvee every vintage, and since '07.
color on this is beautiful, by the way.
2007, if you remember, was a very challenging vintage, not only climate-wise, but economic-wise. When we released these wines, we were in a somewhat of a recession, coupled with the fact that the '07 vintage was panned by the press. Did you pan it, Josh?
I said I thought it was a vintage of different people, what people did, how people handled, particularly the harvest, when they harvested, which I learned early on is a big factor. I mean, it's a factor everywhere, but the old story about the late rains and people get scared or gun shy and they pick too early and you start getting the green stuff. Or if you're, and I think, that's what happened again in 2011, where you can see some beautiful wines if people were patient. And I think that's definitely the fact with '07. And I know how you think, and I know how Patty and Jim Anderson think. And so it doesn't surprise me a bit that these wines are, are doing extremely well. I mean, I think it can be a really, really pretty vintage, but I think that people who picked early before the fruit was ripe, and yeah, there can be some really green, lean, wiry wines that don't give a lot of pleasure, which is kind of, as people say, job one of Pinot Noir.
Yes. In '07, it rained during the harvest, and the grapes were bloated, big, huge, heavy clusters. The yields were high. It was a high producing vintage. And quite honestly, the wines were very angular and slow to come around. This particular bottling is not the best I've had.
It's slipping. The Beaux Frere estate
Is much better.
is holding on surprisingly more than the Upper Terrace.
If any of you,
This is gorgeous, but this thing is just, the fruit hasn't faded at all.
I don't know
Real
if the
pleasant
camera
surprise.
can show, but it looks to me like your Patty Green is darker and more vibrant. I mean, the color is holding on a little more.
Yeah, it is. I think so.
Well, that is the Patty Green Etzel block is adjacent to the Beaux Frere winery vineyard. The Upper Terrace is tucked sort of northwest of the Beaux Frere estate.
the next ridge up.
One ridge, micro ridge over.
It's changing though in the glass. We just opened this, and it's evolving now. It was slightly oxidized when I first tried it. Now it's losing that character.
I think my Jancis Robinson glass might be a little more forgiving than your gigantic Zalto.
Possibly. Yeah, see, either my palate's getting used to it or the wine's tightening up, and
there's some red tones, and there's a lot of this butanol mushroom character that I get with the
butanol. What the hell is that?
It's the chemical pathway to the mushroom smelling things.
Butanol.
I believe that's the name.
That's what you paid all that tuition for.
Yeah.
I thought that's what came out of his ass.
That'd be the pigs on the old farm.
Yeah.
No, this wine, actually, if anything, I find this wine has a lot of blue fruit.
Wow.
So it's still young.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I don't get any kind of mushroom, earth, tobacco, those kind of drier tertiary kind of qualities at all. I mean, I'm really, I would have guessed this. I would have guessed this was at least 5 or 6 years younger than it is.
The upper terrace was planted in 2000 to all the 5 different Dijon clones that you mentioned earlier. So the vineyard was only, 7 years old? Well,
Yeah.
7, yes, the vines were 7 years old at the time.
This tastes to me, I have no idea about this block. This tastes to me like it has a lot of 115 in it.
Has a lot of what?
115 clone.
Oh.
That vineyard
Help yourself.
is planted. It's probably 84. They're the Etzel block is the old vines over there. Right?
Not 84.
Josh, do you know?
I know. He planted Tom Krutner, who owned that vineyard.
Yep. Okay.
He planted first was 86, and then
Okay.
on top of the hill, 87 and 88.
Okay. Hey, Mikey, Jim Anderson has jumped on.
Hey, Jim.
All right. He could tell us.
He said, let's see if he can answer live. I'm not sure how this works. He says Etzel block dates back to the 2003 vintage.
Oh, cool.
Great.
That was
Yeah,
a
it
lot.
says this is the northwest sloping part of their vineyard planted in 1986. We had named
Okay.
this section after Mike when we bought the property in 2000 as an homage to him and the quality of his wines and winery. And he says, we owe Mike, he says, Trey says, we owe Mike a few bottles from a few vintages, I think.
Okay.
Okay, it says it was all Pomard and now it's Pomard in 114,
Okay.
which is interesting. So another question for somebody else asking, what do you guys collect for your own cellars? And what do you like to drink at home?
Was that Rich Schaefer that asked that?
It is.
All right, Rich. Thanks for asking good questions and being out with us.
I'll speak because Mikey doesn't make enough money yet to collect wines, but
I just pilfer.
he just
primarily.
takes mine. So we built a little cellar at our home here, my wife and I, and we go through phases. Nebbiolo from Italy, some Sangiovese as well from Italy, are the grapes. White Burgundy, Chardonnay from Premier and Grand Cru. But they're getting so expensive. Sancerre, I love Sancerre, and Chablis. Right now, I have a love affair with Chablis.
You mentioned Ravenel. You mentioned Ravenel yesterday and how we can't afford to drink it anymore.
William Fev is actually part of my company now, or part of the company that owns us. I'm not part of them. I like some of their Premier Crus. Their Grand Crus tend to be a little too ripe, but maybe in 15 years they may, not be as flamboyant.
So moving quickly over to Sequitur, which is your relatively new project, new vineyard, new winery,
Yeah.
relatively new.
Mm-hmm. Sequitur Vineyard is Gary Critchlow and I got
Your wife.
purchased a 60-acre farm or a tree farm next to the upper terrace, adjacent to and surrounding actually the upper terrace property. And we decided to plant a 12-acre vineyard over 2 years, starting in 2012 and finishing planting in 2013. A Pinot Noir vineyard. It's adjacent to the upper terrace. I mean, there's just a little alley road separating the two. Slightly higher in elevation, same soil profile, a little denser planting with a multiple of clones, many, many different clones. And so our first vintage of Sequitur, and I think Carrie, are you around? I'd like you to meet my wife, Mikey's stepmom, Carrie.
Hello.
There's Carrie.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good to see you. Thanks.
You too.
Anyway, so Carrie does a lot of the graphic designing and the naming of the cuvee. But we make 500 cases a year, starting in 2014. We sell to 4 different wineries: Bo Frere, Walter Scott, 100 Sons. Who else? Oh, and Coattails.
Somebody else too. I think I saw, no?
Bo Frere, Sequitur, Walter Scott, 100 Sons, and Coattails. That's it.
But do you sell Chardonnay to somebody else?
Nope. And
No.
if you see it, tell me. I'll call the police.
I don't think you can call police in the Portland area anymore.
That's right. We live in a liberal environment where we disarm the police department.
Yeah, but probably not in Newburgh.
We never had police in Newburgh.
I know I got a flat tire on the road there one night, and it was not a good thing. No cell phone reception. It's a quiet place. It's beautiful, but until you get a flat tire at 11 o'clock at night.
Well, you shouldn't have hit that pothole.
In your driveway. So production of Sequitur, you're also working with Amphora now.
Yes.
And are you doing some Amphora, Mikey, over at Beaux Frere?
I brought the amphora in. That was another thing that I altered when I came.
I thought that was me. No?
Yeah, you could take credit.
Oh, I won't take credit. Old men, their memories. But
No, please do.
no, not if you claim that.
Yeah, but terracotta is pretty exciting, and we're still learning about it. But it's a part of our Chardonnay and Pinot Noir program.
And you're happy so far. I mean, obviously you're continuing with it. So
Learning a lot about how it can really oxidize the wine in a way that brings fruit more primary and direct, and it can evolve the wine in a way that's not particularly the same as oak. I mean, it's a very different animal than oak. The textural contribution is
Would you strangle that
really
cat?
exciting, and just balancing that, the way that it oxidizes the wine is the tricky part. Vintage specific for sure.
and have you played around with larger formats of barrels?
Yeah, that I'll give credit to. His the 600 liter demi barrel program has been growing since probably the early 2000s, but still fairly small. I love fermenting in them, popping the heads off, and I can really do a good ferment in those little oak uprights.
And you're able to obviously you can probably extend the raising of the wine, right? I mean, you can take it out a little bit further because of the oxidation.
Perhaps, yeah. Lots to learn.
No, I mean, I'm seeing it with more and more people, and it's we're having a big thunderstorm here right now. Sorry.
Yeah.
The lightning just struck behind you.
It was well, that means it was what, 3 seconds ago? Do the count. What about pressing? Do you use basket press?
No, I'd like to get one, but I'd have to ask Daddy for that toy. We use a center load membrane press, and another thing that I changed was the press cycle. He ran a champagne press cycle where you break the cake like 4 times and press it again. And I run the press. You fill it. You don't rotate the cake ever. You run it kind of like a basket press, and it works pretty good. But I do like basket presses for Pinot Noir. You use the pumice as a filter, essentially, keeping the wine clean and of less lees.
And maybe a little over technical for the listeners. I don't know.
I like running our balloon press like a basket press. I'm not very good at explaining this, but yeah.
That's fine. What about Chardonnay?
Pretty similar. We break a few times.
You mean the cake?
And the cake, yeah. We go into barrel dirty as well, so we're not as concerned with that. And
Going into barrel dirty, it means he throws dirt in the barrel.
we do not settle the juice before.
That's where the terroir comes from. That's where the terroir comes from.
We
find it with dirt.
We go directly from the press into barrel. For those that don't know, going to barrel dirty term.
The old well, it's becoming a lot more. Like, it's becoming a lot more common because that leads us to another topic, which I think is really interesting, is the emerging quality. The emerging quality of Chardonnay in Oregon has been amazing. It really is amazing.
Great to hear that. We're kind of just a little slow to bring up our Chardonnay reigns, but I'm very excited about the unveiling and the more exposure that our Chardonnay will start to hopefully gain traction in with our associate winemaker coming from a strong Chardonnay background, the discovery of some really cool terroir from our estate and non-estate Chardonnay sources. I developed a vineyard, so I can't really call it estate apart from Bo Frere, that I think is a really good Chardonnay site
On Parrot Mountain?
on the Parrot Mountain, a non-recognized AVA, but maybe it should be on
Up there where Jim Prosser is.
Yeah,
And that's also our Lake Cadeau is up there.
the vineyard that I developed is just under Le Cadeau. So it's the south side of Parrot Mountain, very rocky, very, very lean soil, and volcanic base origin. And it's very exciting. And it's totally the opposite of the Bo Frere Ribbon Ridge estate, where you have deep marine sedimentary soils, a real power in the soil. So stylistically, it's quite dichotomous.
Yeah, I remember my first trip when I was starting with International Wine Cellar was March of 2005, and I went and visited Harry Peterson, and one of the first things he said come back in about 20 years. He said, the Chardonnays here are going to be better than the Pinot Noirs. I'm not sure if that's going to happen, but at that time, that was kind of a bold statement.
Wow.
I mean, you go back to the early 2000s, and the Chardonnays were there weren't even that many that were really good, much less great. And you guys taste, I know up and down the valley, but the quality that I'm seeing from 2018 and 2017 for Chardonnay is insanely good. And I mean, obviously you have some really talented winemakers, your colleagues, trying their hand in it. But it's a fascinating turn of events for Willamette Valley.
It is. We're picking earlier as a group. We're not making over rich wine Chardonnays. It's there's a lot of people that came in the last 10 years that helped the Oregon Chardonnay production principles really improve the quality, the longevity, the age worthiness, the freshness, for sure.
I think freshness is the main thing, and more judicious use of oak. I mean, I remember way back when it's not that far back. A lot of the Chardonnays tasted like the wineries were using the Chardonnay to rinse out the barrel to prep it for the Pinot Noir.
Yes.
And then bottling it up. You get these wines that they'd be, in the bottle for 3 months, and they look like they're 12 years old or something like that.
what I don't understand, and you taste a lot more wines than I do, how can California with Kistler and Marcasson and Peter Michael get away with that winemaking? Those wines are delicious. They're opulent. Now, some people may not like the style, but certainly can't argue with its precociousness.
Well, I think you could put probably Aubert in there.
And Aubert, certainly.
Oh, I think it's just a different beast, right? I mean, my own tastes run towards, say, Chablis. I mean, if I had to pick a village in the Côte d'Or, I would be saying probably Pouligny, more so than Chassagne or Marceau. And you know, that style, I agree with you. That style, Marcasson, Peter Michael, Aubert. I mean, and Steve Kistler's wines, they're different. I mean, they're rich, but my God, you know, they can be amazing. And then you go right up the coast and you go to a place like Pay, and it's a different beast. So I do think you have a lot of variation, more so. I mean, obviously you have different regions, different soils, different climates, but I'm definitely getting the impression that in the Willamette Valley that, for lack of a better term, Chablis, Pouligny, that racy, tight, structured style with tension is becoming, it's called the style.
It is. Yeah. Well put. I'm excited about it.
Should be. It's pretty cool. I mean, I think a lot of that happened with Isabelle Meunier when she started off down at Seven Springs, and then obviously what she's doing at her own place, and you see what Thomas is doing at Lingua Franca. You look at what Josh Bergstrom did with the Sigrid, his top bottling, the Bergstrom. Yeah, it's really really exciting, and every year it gets more interesting. And how much you don't make it every year, or I don't see it every year from Bo Frere, the Chardonnay.
We don't. Sometimes we don't send it out to get judged because we only make very little, but we are increasing our production now. Our 2008 or 17 or 18 we released.
We're just about to release 2018.
And how many cases is that?
It's still 3 something. Yeah.
360.
But it's
which is nothing compared to.
Right.
So we don't really expose it. Sequitur, we do. We have 1,200 vines of clone 76.
That's a Dijon clone.
And we make right around 50 cases or 600 bottles.
So you're not going to find it at the Tom Thumb or the Kroger's.
No, sorry. We do have a loyal following.
Fred Meyer.
No.
All right. Well, listen. I'm getting the said action. I'm getting the cut signal that we're down to the last.
I am leaving for vacation and headed to Eastern Oregon on the John Day River for a canoe trip. My wife is a seasoned canoeist who will navigate us through the rapids while I sit up front drinking a cold cerveza.
I hope it's a Rainier. Listen, you guys, thank you.
No, thank you.
Thanks, Josh. It was great to chat with you.
And we'll send you some samples of Chris, you're going to bring some what? Some Chardonnay. We'll send you Bo Frere Chardonnay. You want to try the Sequitur Chardonnay?
Yes, please.
All right.
Great. Again, I can't wait to see you guys in person. This is the next best thing. And this is obviously a really nice piece of dirt that you're sitting on.
You take care and thank you, and happy
Safe
4th
trip.
of July.
Safe trip, no deliverance activity.
Dun, 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 dun.